Alright, so for the past month, I've been shooting with this camera, and I'm going to pretty much recommend buying this if you're just getting into film photography, as opposed to a AE Program, AE1, any of those very high-end expensive cameras. I'm going to go over the disadvantages and advantages of this camera for film 35mm, especially if you're just getting started and you don't know exactly which direction to go yet, and you don't want to spend a lot of money. So this camera is the SRT 100. I was able to pick this camera up for about 1/5 the price of a Canon AE Program and all those other super expensive cameras. It has a really good lens lineup for its time. The Minolta made some pretty good stuff. It comes with a nice light meter on the bottom for battery check on and off, and a nice little viewfinder for that. It is a pretty darn good little camera. It comes in, it's pretty heavy. So if you were thinking of, having something that's lightweight, maybe and you already have Canon lenses, the EF lenses, you can just go with a Rebel, or the known as the KISS in Japan and known as the EOS 500 in Europe. This camera has pretty minimal features, but you can make it work, especially if it's one of your first cameras that you're getting for film photography. It has all the nice little features that you'd want, a little spool, and it has a little bit different setup for feeding the film into it, but it gets the job done. And does a really good job of it. Very cool little mechanism in there. Has a nice little set your ISO so that you don't forget what you had in there. You set the ISO up top for what you want, and it does a really good job. The light meter, as far as I can tell, works perfectly. I've been able to take out and finally get developed some black and white, which I'm going to show you some of the photos from it. Some of the advantages from buying the Minolta SRT 100 is, of course, the lenses, the cost, and the fact that it is a very classic film camera feel and experience. Those are probably some of the best parts about it. Also, it has a bulb and everything mode that you can use if you so desire. The batteries are not very picky. I definitely have the wrong battery in here, but it works the light meter just fine. And now I'm going to show you some of the film that I was able to get developed and then scan myself. And here's some of them. We went downtown Reno, and we had a really beautiful spring evening where we were taking photos, and all the cherry blossoms were coming in, and they turned out wonderful. Some of the things that you'll definitely know or need to know is that the lenses, like any of the others, I'm going to make a video on how to get your photos sharper, but shooting around f8 5.6 is going to give you the sharpest results, and it definitely came through here. Also, the swap from having a very high-end camera with all sorts of stability, you definitely notice the lack of stability as soon as you go below 120, and it's all right, but you just have to remember to keep a high shutter speed if you can. One of my favorite photos here is the cherry blossoms, and it absolutely popped through this photo. I had to do some experimenting with how to get my setup for scanning to work properly, but finally got it dialed in. And then this other one where it shows super crispy images, or at least edges, from some of the buildings downtown Reno. Absolutely one of my favorite photos from that walk. So some of the disadvantages that come with owning this Minolta SRT 100. One is the weight, and we already talked about that. And then there's also the shutter speed. So the shutter speed is going to have significantly more minimal options than what you will get on other cameras. You only have a 500 shutter speed, which means when it's super bright out, you might have issues. And this camera was designed to deal with that in a very different way. So this one has ISO that goes down to all the way to 6, which was usually considered for like scanning film or like scanning documents. And so that's how they deal with the brightness, and that was a mechanical limitation of the time when they made these. And so what you do is you go and you take daylight film when you have a super bright day and 50 ISO. So then 50 ISO at 500 shutter speed is the equivalent of having 100 ISO and shooting at 1,000 shutter speed. So instead of increasing the shutter speed, you get to decrease the ISO for sunny days. And that's kind of just something to consider. I would say 50 daylight isn't that hard to find, but getting anything lower into the 20s or whatever might be a struggle. Another disadvantage is the lack of settings like double exposure, where you can just press a button and it will double expose your film for you. And hold it there. You have other ways to get through it by pressing the button at the bottom and then advancing the shutter, but not the film. And that is one of the things that I do miss about the KISS or the ISO 500 is that it was a very modern setup. You're going to lose a little bit more film as you start it. I had one that I had done and half the photo is missing because just the process of loading this film takes a decent amount of film to get it there. And the final thing that I would say that is also endearing is the way that it has the exposure shown inside the camera. And because this exposure is a little bit different and has a very different way of doing it, it's easier to miss exposure as opposed to just having one of the newer designs where it's 1 through 3 in either direction for exposure, and it's very easy to see and set. Otherwise, I would say this is a perfect film camera to get into film photography in an older, more SLR style, and I definitely recommend. I really enjoyed the photos I got out of it, and I'm super excited to go and shoot the cine film that I have. So thank you so much for watching. What do you think about the SRT 100, and what will be your next camera purchase? Thank you so much for watching. Take care.